Hello, my name is Katherine NS, and today I'm going to be doing my Theory of Knowledge presentation. And it is going to be mostly focusing on what is certainty and what is uncertainty and truth. So my real life situation is the Copenhagen interpretation. Is it possible to determine certainty? So that was my real life situation. The Copenhagen interpretation states that physical systems do not have definite properties until they are measured. Quantum mechanics can only predict the probabilities that measurements will produce certain results. A wave function, which is denoted by this sign right here, represents the state of the system. It encapsulates everything that can be known about the system, such as its momentum, its position, and before an observation. And once it is observed, once it's measured, the wave function, as it says, collapses because you find one thing. You cannot know the momentum, for example, of a particle or a particle and its position. And one of the questions we can ask is, what counts as a measurement? Does it have to, why is the measurement only, when we say measurement, we mean what humans measure. But if that were to happen somewhere in a different part of the universe, or as we say, alternate universes, would that still be the same measurement? So my knowledge question is, how difficult is it to establish universal truths in various areas of knowledge? And here we have a wave function, just to show. So my two areas of knowledge will be history and the natural sciences, and I chose these two because there are many, history depends on truth and facts so that we can analyze it to this day. And the natural sciences, they obviously also rely on truth and certainty, because once we have the facts, we can move on to have another theory and so on. And my two ways of knowledge will be perception and faith. It's just briefly some keywords that I will be mentioning throughout the presentation is perspective versus perception. I'm going to be talking about points of views and how we use our senses to interpret things. I will be discussing shared knowledge, and it includes following things like historical facts and certain historical interpretations, which make up shared knowledge in history. However, there are cases where it can only be personal knowledge. There's also common sense realism, which is a philosophy of mind rooted in the theory of perception that claims that the senses provide us with direct awareness of the external world, which is not always the case. And pseudoscience, which will be mentioned later when I discuss the natural sciences. And in the question, the word difficult, we must also establish what is meant by difficult. Does that mean it has taken more time, or does it take more effort, or there are more arguments and people cannot actually make it certain? So in my area of knowledge for history, perception in history is very important. One example is the Stalin-Lenin relationship. How close were Stalin and Lenin truly? In our history class in IB, we were discussing, when learning about dictatorship and Stalin, we were learning about how Stalin and Trotsky were fighting for Lenin's position once he dies. And in many cases, there were many perspectives on it, different points of view. So some members of the political party, the Communist Party, would say that Stalin would seem to be a very close member of the party and was very close to Lenin, whereas I guess more leftists, people who follow Trotsky, would actually say the opposite, so that Trotsky would have a better chance at becoming the leader. And this is one of the things that historians must do. They must analyze all the facts and then come to a conclusion later, or never come to a conclusion because the information provided does not suffice. There's also the Armenian genocide recognition, and from this perspective, the Armenian government, 1.5 million Armenians were systematically killed. However, the Ottoman Empire actually denied any involvement, and they didn't say that they were systematically killed. And there's also the denial of the Holocaust. Some historians to this day, such as David John Caudell Irving, who is an English Holocaust historian and denier, and the Mayer controversy. In both these cases, historians who have the same access to the same resources as all other historians still deny two things that in our shared knowledge have happened. And what this denial is, it's the act of denying the genocide of Jews and other groups in the Holocaust during the Second World War, It includes following claims such as Nazi Germany's final solution was only aimed at deporting Jews from the Reich, but did not include the extermination of Jews. For example, in the Mayer controversy, Mayer stated that Auschwitz victims died of natural causes such as disease instead of systematic killing or gassing. And David Irving, his reputation as a historian, was discredited when, in course of an unsuccessful libel case he filed against the American historian Deborah Lipstadt and Penguin Books, he deliberately misrepresented historical evidence to promote Holocaust denial. So perhaps he did have the same historical evidence that other historians do, but perhaps using a different perception and his different perspective on the issue, he came to a conclusion that it did not happen. So still continuing with the area of knowledge for history, here are two photos of Stalin, and one of his commissars is missing, and actually in the Soviet Union it was quite common for many photos to be photoshopped to aid the leader, to perhaps show, in one case he's actually taken out of a photo next to Lenin's speech, or he was actually put in, and this can be manipulated in any way, which actually flaunts his credibility. And same here, where we have Adolf Hitler standing, and there is Goebbels in this photo, but not in this photo, which can be suggestive that over in history, Photoshop has, again, perhaps it hasn't affected how valuable it is, but it has definitely affected how certain we are of what was actually in the photo and its credibility to use in other historical research. And there's also faith in history. So many Christians, they believe that the universe was created by a divine being, mostly God, and this is known as creationism. And as they say, it is called specific acts of divine creation. And creation science and theistic evolution view that there's omniscient and omnipresent being who created the universe from the very beginning. He either created the universe as a whole, or he created the first cell so that then evolution could take its toll. And both of these agree that there was a being, God, who actually sparked something to cause evolution, or just sparked everything as it is now, our universe. And here we have sense perception combined with faith religion. Many people follow the Bible, and as it is written in the Bible, that is how they believe it. They use their sense perception, they see what is written in the Bible, they believe that what is in front of them is what it actually is. And so this is an example of common sense realism, where what you see is what is true. And that links back to how difficult it is to establish universal truths in various areas of knowledge, because this also depends on a person's religion and his or her faith in so what they believe. And again, these people, just like the Holocaust deniers or the Armenian genocide deniers, these are people who are presented with the same facts, unless there are the extreme circumstances where those people are actually don't have access to any historical facts or information. But those who do have this access, they can still have a different view on these things because of their faith, their different faiths. And there's also an example of the cargo cults, where there is a quasi-religious movement situated in Pacific Islands that revered the material goods of Western colonies, and they believe that these things were made of magic, and they actually believe that these artifacts or these shipments that came to them were actually all magically made, and they believe this for some time because they have no other thing to compare it to. And that was their perspective on it, because that was what they knew, and that's what it was to them. And there's also perception in sciences. So in psychology, the psychology perspective, an approach is a perspective that involves certain assumptions about human behavior, the way they function, which aspects of them are worthy to study, and what research methods are appropriate for undertaking the study. There may be several different theories within an approach, but they all share these common assumptions. Some examples are behaviorist perspective, psychodynamic perspective, humanism, cognitive psychology, biological psychology, and evolutionary psychology. For example, I will take two of these examples and talk about what they are. So humanism, for example, is believing that there is a study of holism, which is the study of the whole person, the whole body, and it's studying it through the eyes of the person who is affected. And there's also evolutionary psychology, which is an approach that explains behavior in terms of the selective pressures that shape behavior through, and these behaviors that are displayed are believed to have developed through EEA, which is environment of evolutionary adaptation to help us survive. However, although these are all different to each other, they can either cancel each other out or they can build up on each other, and they're all important. And different psychologists believe that each one of these is either true or not true. And actually, in psychology, there has been the biggest paradigm shift, because many psychologists initially begin to believe that one thing is true, one way of treating a person is the right way. But once there's more research and there's more factual knowledge, and there's, as the question says, perhaps to them, universal truth, it becomes established as fact, and then they have to work off of that and then create new theories and hypotheses. As well, in the natural sciences, there is dark matter, which is an unidentified type of matter distinct from dark energy, baryonic matter, and neutrinos. But how do we perceive it to detect it? Well, it was first detected really when people found the cosmic background microwave waves and radiation. And this is what initially sparked the research into this. It also explains why galaxies rotate really quickly. However, there are different ways to actually detect it. Although we don't know which ways to detect it, this shows that there are different sense perceptions to identifying different things. Perhaps there is just no sense perception in humans that can detect dark matter at this moment. Perhaps there will be something later on. And also, one that is quite important now, really relevant, is climate change denial, which is an example of pseudoscience, where again, all scientists are given the same facts. And this shows that whether is scientific evidence enough, however, many people can actually manipulate this information and say that this is from a different cause, or global warming is supposed to happen because it's normal. However, scientists do see that the increasing amount of CO2 in our atmosphere is affecting, for example, the poles, and water levels are rising. But there are still different views on it, different perspectives, because it depends on a person how they interpret different information and different facts. So to conclude, so the real life situation I chose was the Copenhagen interpretation, because it still cannot be determined to this day. That is why quantum mechanics is such an intriguing part of science, because there's no way to know. It was the reason many scientists were actually against this theory, is because there was no way to actually find out whether it was true or not. Physical systems generally do not have definite properties prior to being measured, but what actually counts as measurement? That is something that perhaps will never be universal truth, because we do not know everything in the universe, and therefore there can never be a universal truth. There may be truths relative to us and relative to other people, but in terms of the entire universe and how we understand it, there must be some limit, because we cannot understand and know everything. And it is based on probability instead of certainty, and truth really does depend on certainty. Truth is certainty. And scientific statement speaks about reality, it must be falsifiable, and insofar as it is not falsifiable, it does not speak. By Karl Popper, who is actually a British philosopher, or Dutch. And this statement shows that really for there to be a truth, if it is ever proven wrong in any way, at any time, that means it is not true. It's not certain. And that is why I chose to do my presentation on it, because there is so much uncertainty in our universe, and to actually find a universal truth, one that applies to every single situation, is almost impossible, but perhaps could happen. Thank you.